Jonathan, thanks very much for being with her tonight. Do you buy the theory of a madman for Donald Trump? Any similarities you sense with the Nixon era?
I don't buy the madman theory. There is a saying here that we should take Trump seriously, but we should not take him literally.
No. That was Kaplan on the last show, last week's interview. He said the same words.
Yes.
Take him seriously, not literally.
Yes, and I think that is the way that we should be viewing him. He is a man that likes to disrupt. He is a man that likes to shatter long-held sclerotic views of foreign policy that have dominated for years, if not decades. He likes to break things, but he does not want conflict. He's actually averse to conflict. He is averse to sending troops to war. He is about bringing Americans home. He's about trying to make a better life. It doesn't mean that I agree with everything that he says or does, but I do think that there is a method to his madness. It may yet backfire, some of what he's trying to do. The undermining of the American bureaucracy in particular makes me concerned, because when you start to peel away elements of that bureaucracy, you do have to wonder what is left, and whether the people who are still in their chairs are able to guide the bureaucracy in the right direction, because this all has to outlive Donald Trump. This is the stable component of the American government when politicians come and go. That's actually the thing that worries me the most. The foreign policy worries me less, although I would say from the perspective of Europe, keep an eye on Ukraine. The withdrawal of support to Ukraine could have significant ramifications.
We'll get into that. Before getting to Ukraine, at the point that we see today, is there any possibility for the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip that would entail elements of the Trump plan of literally taking all the population out of the Gaza Strip, reconstructing it in, turning it into something much different, and then putting back all the Palestinians, 2 million people, back in their land?
Look, let me first say there is no Trump plan. There is a notion, there is an idea, there is a concept. It's not a plan. A plan means there's 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, and we know exactly which way, right? So we have an idea of what Trump wants to do. We know that the Arab states will refuse. They will not move Palestinians out of Gaza. This is a long...
There's no place for them to stay, actually, nowhere.
Well, there are plenty of places where they could go.
Like?
The Arab states could accept them, but they won't.
Yeah.
This is a question of will. It's a question of political will, and they have none, right? The Arab world has long held that the Palestinians should stay no matter what the conditions, no matter what kind of suffering they deal with, that this is their home, that they need to defend it at all costs, and you're not our problem. That's what the Arabs say. Could we see, for example, Asian countries that have Muslim populations, could they absorb Palestinians? Absolutely. Indonesia, Malaysia. We could look at Central Asian countries that have perhaps a religious interest in the Palestinian cause but are not shackled by the politics of the Arab world. That's a possibility. Sub-Saharan Africa, also an area that they're not beholden to the same politics of the Arab world. But then I think comes the other question, which is the rebuilding part of this. Is this really something that the United States public is going to want to do? Let's say we don't have to put troops on the ground. We still have to put contractors on the ground, and those contractors could be targeted by terrorist attacks. These are the sorts of things that I think we learned over time from the experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's what's so interesting to me, is that Donald Trump, who has built a political career on slamming the American experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan, has actually recycled an element of that concept, which is to say that Americans can help rebuild basket cases in the Middle East. And that's what he's suggested. I think that we need to learn more. I like that he's challenging the Arab world. But if you ask me, what he's done is he's started a conversation that will not end with his idea. Right. He starts with an opening gambit. They will respond. He will respond. Eventually, I think we will see where there is room for an actual negotiation. we're not there yet.
Okay. Just to finalize the Middle East conversation, the Abraham Accords were one of the major diplomatic successes of his first presidential term. Do you sense he could build on that towards a new era on the Middle East?
Oh, yeah. This is his unfinished business. Donald Trump was this close to getting a deal done with Saudi Arabia. He wants to return to that. What's interesting, though, is I actually think that this ties back to your last question. The discussion about Gaza and the harsh response that we've seen from Saudi Arabia as in terms of rejecting the transfer of Palestinians out of Gaza, this is, in my view, the beginning of the conversation that will eventually lead to normalization. Because the Saudis want things from us here in the United States. They want a defense pact. They want weapons. They want additional oil sales. They want things, they want to actually enrich uranium. They're asking things of the United States right now. We have to decide what we want to give them, and we need to ask things in return. This is the very Trumpian way. It's transactional. So I think we are on our way in a discussion that just began with the Saudis. Right now it's focused on Gaza. Eventually it's going to widen and then narrow.
Okay, let's shift the discussion to Ukraine. If Trump were to cut aid to Ukraine or push them to some kind of negotiations with Russia, with a potential settlement, how would that reshape European security and the balance of power, of course, with Russia?
Look, I don't see an end to this war as under negotiated terms. With the map looking like it does right now, I don't see that benefiting anybody except for Vladimir Putin. It might free up some trade. It might make things a little more calm in Europe, but in the long term, it's not going to deter Vladimir Putin, and it's not going to change some of the perspectives of the isolationists in this country, which I think need to be addressed as well. The thing that I would say right now is that Europe and the United States have a lot of work to do. The trust there is non-existent. And I think that until that's fixed, I don't think we're going to solve the underlying problems of Russia. In other words, the Europeans were told for 4 years under the last Trump administration that they needed to increase the expenditure on military. This is part of their NATO obligation. Most refused, most actually derided Trump. I mean, really showed no respect for him for various reasons, but it blew up in their face. When Putin invaded Ukraine in 2022, it changed everything. Now Trump has come back. He does not like them. They don't like him. And now we have to decide how we're going to come together with the Europeans to deter Vladimir Putin from engaging in additional aggressive acts on the European continent. This is not a good place to start right now. And so if we basically just say we're leaving the Europeans to themselves, we're forcing the Ukrainians to give up on all of their demands and claims with regard to Russia, where does that leave us? It leaves us with a stronger Russia and a weaker Europe. This is what we cannot have moving forward. So my hope anyway is that we see more engagement on the part of the Trump administration to strengthen the European military position.
The Europeans had a summit last week. They discussed the issue. There is a plan on the table for $100 billion, for 100 billion euros as a starter for building up a closer defense coalition. How do you see this evolving?
Look, I think the devil's in the details, and obviously the money, everyone needs to pony up. I think the fractures in Europe are quite obvious to many of us. You see the difference between Western Europe and Eastern Europe, those that are committed to security, those that don't see the need. And by the way, it's very interesting to see the Middle East dividing line as well, the way they view Israel, the way they view the Iranian threat. There are a lot of fissures within Europe. It's going to be important to see Europe come together. I don't think that we see leadership right now within the European sort of landscape, right? It used to be that it was Germany. Germany has fallen down a step. We thought maybe the Brits would be the leaders in perpetuity, but Brexit has changed that. The French are not the leaders that we thought they would be. So there is a deficit right now. So it's one thing to spend money. It's another thing to know how that money is going to be directed and to have moral clarity coming from a leader or a group of leaders within Europe, that's what I'm still waiting to see.
Do you sense the U.S. involvement in our region, the East Mediterranean, will somehow deepen, or do you think that he has no interest at all?
Look, I think that interest has been lukewarm for many years. I see the East Med as being crucial to American interests, to regional security. The question at the end of the day is how much is the U.S. interested in investing in the Eastern Med? How much are we interested in intervening when we see Turkish malign activity on the Mediterranean? These things are not yet known to us. I think Greece needs to do a much better job of explaining the challenges that it is currently experiencing with regard to Turkey. They are not known in the United States. This is not on Donald Trump's radar. And so if the goal is to have more American involvement in the East Med, there needs to be more information flowing to the average American news consumer, and right now there's virtually none.
Finally, do you sense that most of Trump's diplomatic posture derives from his political intentions in the US and the messages he's sending to his national audience?
I think a lot of it is done for national consumption, but I think this is a president that I think has changed a lot over the last 8 years. Early on, I think he wasn't even sure what he would do when he became president. That was clear. I mean, he came in and he learned as he went. He was building the plane as he was flying it. He had 4 years to sit and reflect on what he was able to accomplish with not a lot of experience. Now that he has the experience and he has a staff of people, a group of people around him that he can trust more, I think he's now looking at a legacy of starting to change the international landscape. So I think it's going to be very interesting what we see from Donald Trump over the next 4 years. I think he's going to be far more ambitious and he knows more than he did before.
Jonathan, thank you very much for taking the time to be with Earth tonight.
Thank you.